These January 6th commemorations are turning into an
orgy of self-righteousness and projection.
The headline of the day, every tweet of the day from any blue checkmark on Twitter is commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection that never was. And I've got to tell you something. This is turning into nothing but the most egregious and self-gratifying orgy of self-righteousness and absolute political projection. Now, for those of you who've been living under a rock with no neighbors, no internet connection, and no means of communicating with the world whatsoever, 1 year ago to the day was the infamous insurrection, a day that will live in infamy, where there were rioters descending on Capitol Hill, and they stormed Capitol Hill to overturn an election. At least that is one way of looking at it, certainly the blue checkmark mainstream media way of looking at it. For others who have a little bit more information and who dive into the actual real questions, there's a little more to the January 6th insurrection that never was than meets the eye. I have done a number of breakdowns on it. I did one very recently, breaking down a story in the Revolver, showing that it's a little weird that in this massive insurrection, that the only unindicted co-conspirators were basically the biggest agitators, the biggest instigators in that January 6th insurrection thing. While they were literally locking up and detaining people for months on end, sometimes in solitary confinement because of COVID, people with no criminal histories, people who were not even accused of having committed violent crimes that day, some of them were actual literal grandmothers. While they were locking these people up for months on end, somehow the main agitators still to this day remain unindicted co-conspirators, which causes some people to ask the question, who were these people in the first place and what was their role in participating or instigating in this January 6th insurrection? But I have already done a ton of vlogs on the subject. Robert Barnes and I have discussed it at length during our weekly live streams on Sunday, but if you have only one video to watch the last breakdown I did of the Revolver story, because it will truly be an eye-opening story if you are not yet familiar with the details. The purpose of today's vlog is to go over some of the outrageous takes by the blue checkmark crowd on Twitter, and on this day of commemorating the infamous day of the January 6th insurrection, what better way to celebrate it than by discharging people from the Navy who refused to take the COVID shot? From Fox News, Navy discharges first sailors for declining COVID-19 vaccine. The group of 20 sailors were removed during their initial training period. This on the same day President Biden on Thursday blamed former President Trump for stoking insurrection at the Capitol on Jan 6, 2021. And before we move on, just to address the absolute absurdity in that headline and that story that the Navy discharges sailors who decline to get the vaccine, well, I gotta tell you one thing. If you get fired for not getting something, you never had the option in the first place. But who am I to talk? I am now living in a province where if you don't get the third shot, you are no longer going to be compliant with the vaccine passport. I never downloaded the app. I have been living as an unclean despite the fact that I did in fact get both shots, but I gotta tell you one thing, I will officially be unclean as of January 18th in my own province. But what is going on in La Belle Province, which is the nickname for Quebec, might be of limited interest. Let's just get back to some of these wonderfully awful takes from people celebrating the January 6th insurrection on Twitter. From Joy Ann, pro-democracy Reid with an emoji with a face mask on it. Blue checkmark, at Joy Ann Reid. Will never forget. In reference to a tweet from Michael Boschloss, quote, Trump incites mob, end quote, New York Times reports on Jan 6, 2021. First things first, and pro-life tip for anybody out there, if you meet someone and they have to put pro-democracy in their name, chances are they are not pro-democracy. Secondly, Joy Ann Reid will never forget. This is the type of rhetoric that you save for absolute historical atrocities. Specifically in respect of the Holocaust, there was nie wieder, which means never again in German. We will not forget. So when you use this type of terminology in respect of a riot, it sort of cheapens the terminology in the first place. And in respect of the substance of what we'll never forget, she is referencing a New York Times article, and just to reread that headline, the New York Times, New York, Thursday, January 7, 2021. Trump incites mob. Rampage in Capitol forces evacuation. It's, quote, part of his legacy, end quote, a Republican says. Well, since Joy Ann Reid is on the subject of fake news, here's another headline that the New York Times ran at the time. He dreamed of being a police officer, then was killed by a pro-Trump mob. The death of Brian Sicknick, a military veteran and experienced Capitol Police officer, amplified the tragedy of Wednesday's riots and undermined President Trump's pro-law enforcement claims. Now, for those of you who may not know, this story was an outright lie. Brian Sicknick died of natural causes of a stroke that had nothing to do with the events of January 6th, and it was known at the time and ought to have been known to the New York Times, but they nonetheless ran with this bogus story. Yes? Get out of here. They ran with this story despite knowing it was not true, despite knowing that it was an outright lie, and this story is still viewable on the internet. And so when it comes to Joy Ann Reid citing the fake news New York Times, I had to respond with the following tweet. Viva Frei at the Viva Frei replying to at Joy Ann Reid. Don't forget this one, Joy, since you have a propensity for believing lies. FYI, Sicknick was not killed, he died of natural causes. And then, coming from a man who has a master's, no, he has a PhD in fake news and political spin, Aaron Rupert. Aaron Rupert, blue checkmark at AT Rupert. Question, will you commit to a peaceful transfer of power after the election? Trump, quote, we're gonna have to see what happens, end quote. And just so no one thinks I'm totally crazy, I was not digging up old tweets from Aaron Rupert. He retweeted one of his old tweets to, I guess, prove a point, to which I responded as follows. Viva Frei at the Viva Frei. He should have just done what Obama did. Spy on his predecessor, abuse of the FISA courts, and fabricate an alleged conspiracy to undermine his presidency for the next 4 years. At AT Rupert. Because for those of you who may not know, just appreciate the irony here. The very same people criticizing Trump for not committing to a peaceful transfer of power are literally the same people who participated in the Russiagate hoax, are literally the same people who abused of the FISA courts to falsify evidence, to get a warrant, to spy on Carter Page, which they then used to go spy on Donald Trump after he won the election. And for the next 3+ years, they ran with this bogus Russiagate hoax to absolutely undermine President Trump's presidency, and now they're the ones looking at Trump and saying, will you commit in advance to a peaceful transfer of power? These people are pure projection people.
Pure projection.
And then speaking of projection, the master projector, Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper, blue checkmark at Jake Tapper. A lot of pundits making it crystal clear today where they would have stood had Trump's attempt to undermine the election and remain president actually worked. This coming from the guy from the network that spent years literally telling you that Trump colluded with the Russians to interfere with US elections. This coming from CNN, a network now that is known for much more sinister things. But yeah, Jake, thanks for telling us what you think in your own heart of hearts. Now maybe you should go back to look at your own network and possibly report on their own wrongdoings. And I've got to say, I don't remember if Jake Tapper was always this much of a partisan reporter hack or if he just got worse over time, so I had to ask him the question, but it has not yet been answered. Viva Frei at the Viva Frei. My goodness, were you always a pathological liar at Jake Tapper, or did it just happen gradually over time? And then if you look further down, you can see a video that I posted on my second channel, Viva Family, where I taught my kid the difference between deciduous and coniferous trees. And while we're on the subject of absolute confession through projection, Pete Buttigieg had to chime in as well. Secretary Pete Buttigieg, blue checkmark at Secretary Pete. Quote, you can't love your country only when you win, end quote. Well said, at POTUS. Thank you for your moral clarity in defending our democracy. Setting aside the fact that nothing even remotely resembling morality or clarity has come out of President Biden's presidency to date, I had to take note of the irony of this statement coming from Buttigieg. Viva Frei at the Viva Frei. This coming from the quote Russiagate, end quote crowd is truly ironic. And then a tweet from never let a good crisis go to waste, pathological liar Elizabeth Warren herself. Elizabeth Warren, blue checkmark at E. Warren. 1 year ago today, Donald Trump incited a mob of domestic terrorists to attack our Capitol and try to overturn an election. I'm thinking of the families who lost loved ones defending the Capitol, and I'm thinking about all the work we must do to secure our democracy. The families of those who lost loved ones on January 6th. Now, for those of you who do not recall, the day of and in the days following, they were reporting something like 6 people were killed during the events of January 6th. It turns out that 5 of them died from medical emergencies, and there was only 1 person who was actually killed that day. Viva Frei at the Viva Frei. You're thinking of Ashley Babbitt's family, the young woman who was shot in the neck point blank by a DC officer? That's very thoughtful of you, at E. Warren. Now, for those of you who are watching this vlog thinking that I am downplaying the events of January 6th, I am not downplaying the events of January 6th. I am in fact asking the important questions. Yes, it was a riot. Yes, it got violent. Yes, it seems that it was instigated or led by people who have yet to be indicted for some reason that is known only to the FBI. I'm not downplaying this, but I am not blowing it up into something that it is not, thereby detracting from all the other real tragedies out there. To call this an insurrection is to abuse of the term insurrection. To compare this to 9/11 is an abuse of the memory of 9/11. I had a brother and a sister in New York on 9/11. I was on the phone with my brother when the first tower started going down. To compare January 6th to 9/11 is an absolute disgrace in and of itself. To compare it to Pearl Harbor is an outrage. To compare it to any historical atrocity is an absolute abuse of memory and fact. And in that vein, let's go to a tweet from Jim Scudo. Jim Scudo, blue checkmark, at Jim Scudo. Encountering the big lie point by point, strikes me Biden realizes he has a rare chance to speak directly to right-wing voters. There are a lot of blue checkmarks in mainstream media, too many blue checkmarks in mainstream media, who are repeating this big lie trope, and they either don't know or do know but don't care that the big lie itself is literally a Hitler trope. Viva Frei, at the Viva Frei, replying to at Jim Scudo. Still using the Hitler trope, quote, big lie, end quote, I see. I guess it's not offensive when blue checkmark mainstream media liars do it. And for those of you out there who may not know the history of the trope of the big lie, from Wikipedia, big lie. The big lie, German, große Lüge, is a gross distortion or misrepresentation of the truth used especially as a propaganda technique. The German expression was coined by Adolf Hitler when he dictated his 1925 book Mein Kampf to describe the use of a lie so colossal that no one would believe that someone, quote, could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously, end quote. Hitler claimed that the technique had been used by Jews to blame Germany's loss in World War I on German General Erich Ludendorff, who was a prominent nationalist political leader in the Weimar Republic. So congratulations, Jim Scudo and the other blue checkmarks in mainstream media who are repeating this term, the big lie. You are successfully employing actual Hitler terminology. And just to end on two of my tweets, which I'm somewhat proud of because I think it is the right take. Viva Frei, at the Viva Frei. Today is January 6th, the one-year anniversary of the, quote, insurrection, end quote. An unarmed insurrection, in which the most active instigators are still unindicted co-conspirators. And the only person killed was a young woman shot point blank in the neck by a DC officer. Hashtag insider insurrection. And a few hours later, Viva Frei, at the Viva Frei, the people who are commemorating, quote, Insurrection Day, end quote, today are literally the same ones who tried to stage a coup against the sitting president by spying on him, submitting falsified evidence to a FISA court, and propagating the absolute, quote, Russiagate, end quote, hoax for over 3 years.
Oh, snap.
The media and political response to the events of January 6th is absolutely over the top. To refer to it as an insurrection is intellectually and linguistically dishonest. To compare it to 9/11 or Pearl Harbor is morally outrageous. And to politically weaponize it for the sake of malicious prosecutions, over-the-top prosecutions, congressional committees to investigate your political adversaries,
Well, I guess that's just politics.
but just view the blue checkmark mainstream media and political response to the events of January 6th for what it is, and you will see the world more clearly. It is pure confession through projection. The response reveals not only the inner psychology of the people who are responding this way, it also reveals what they need this to be so that they can weaponize it politically to pursue their own political ends. Which is exactly why we are seeing the weaponizing of all aspects of January 6th, from the prosecution of the people who were involved in it to the congressional hearings. It is being weaponized purely for political purposes, and in so doing, they are doing an injustice to everything else they are comparing this event to. And with that said, if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm. If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. Robert Barnes and I do weekly streams every Sunday. We do weekly streams with a guest every Wednesday called The Sidebar. If you want to find us and support us on Locals, where supporters get lots of exclusive content, you can find us at
VivaBarnesLaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, who has recently merged with Locals, and you can actually find a neat little direct link to our Locals community from my Rumbles page. I'll show you a little graphic right now so you can find your way there. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!